Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Chris and this is Fully Defined. I've been a SolidWorks certified expert since 2013 and today I'll show you how to design like one. In this video, we're looking at how to add professional polish to your parts using fillets and chamfers. These features are deceptively simple, but when used well, they take your models from blocky to brilliant. I'll also show you how to avoid common issues and clean up your geometry properly. These lessons you're about to see are taken from my full SolidWorks for Designers course on Udemy, where I go deeper into the tools and provide project files to follow along. If you want to learn faster with additional content, practice files, and support, check out the full Udemy course linked below. Okay, quick tip to start off this section on fillets and chamfers edge details. We've been working on a number of parts and we've hopefully been taking them all to one folder. When you have parts like that, you can see here, we've got a number of parts, part 1, 2, 5, 6, and 7, if you've been following my naming conventions. If I want to open all of those parts at the same time, all I have to do is click and drag from my folder into SolidWorks, and it'll open all of those files for me as separate part files. You usually have to wait a few seconds, but it's a much quicker process than going to File, Open from within SolidWorks and repeating the same thing. Now, the reason that we've opened these files is because we're going to start doing some adjustments to these as part of the next element of the course. I want to show you this tool, which is to select window and tile horizontally. And this spreads out your parts to show you all the detail to show you all the parts or assemblies or drawings that you've actually got open at one time. You can change this by minimizing a certain part, and then you can go window, tile once again, and it will reconfigure or respace the remaining open parts, while the one that you've minimized, you can see is down here. Okay, so it's not closed, but it is down bottom there. Now, it's not quite obvious yet what we're creating through this project, but as we make or refine some of these parts and get into the assembly, it will become clear. So now we're going to learn about editing parts with fillets and chamfers. Now, fillets and chamfers are useful for creating main geometry at times where you're just trying to smooth one face to another or take off a sharp edge. They can be used regularly for styling. So a lot of the time in my models, in my designs, fillets and chamfers will actually be at the lower end of the feature tree because the things added right at the end to give the finishing details to a part. It's really important that you understand the workflow in SolidWorks for adding things like fillets and chamfers when you're doing, let's say, plastic injection molding parts. One thing that you don't want to do is add some of those details, like some really small fillets, before you need to add draft angles to all of your walls, faces. Often if you need to draft, so add draft to a face that's vertical and you need to, add like 2 or 3 degrees draft so it will come out of a tool. If you've already got a fillet on the bottom edge, it becomes much more difficult to add that. You'll have to delete the fillet and then add the draft in. So there's all these all these methods of working which you only really pick up with experience or if someone's trained you, which is difficult to know. But, I've learned the hard way over many, many years of experience and learning from some guys that were really experienced, been using SolidWorks for over 10 years and been working in the design industry for over 15 or 20 years. And now I hope to communicate some of that knowledge to you. So we'll start with a simple exercise just to look at the differences between the two, and then we'll add some fillets to the existing geometry that we've already done. So I want to start a new part, and this is just to explain the difference between the two, fillets and chamfers. We're going to do create this kind of shape. So I want you to do a rectangle, 100 by 100. And we're going to extrude it up 30. And then on the top of that rectangle, we're going to do a circle, let's say 50 millimeters, and extrude that up 50. So we just created a simple shape like this. And this is all we need to learn about fillets and chamfers, the basics. So fillet and chamfer are both up here. Fillet gets prominence because it is used more often. But as we showed earlier with Customize, if you're going to use both, you can always put chamfer up there too. What I've got in the habit of more recently in my workflow is if I need to add a fillet, let's say to this edge, when I click on the edge and I go to this little shortcut menu that pops up, the fillet and chamfer options are here. So I don't even need to go to the top menu. I can just click on this button and that's going to add a fillet to that edge. So let's talk about the process of adding a fillet or chamfer to your model. You can do it, as we've said before, there's always multiple ways of doing the same thing. You can select an edge and press fillet, or you can press fillet and then select an edge. Either way, you'll get the same sort of starting point result. Now, my default size or my default increments is 0.5 millimeters. So when I start any sort of chamfer or fillet, it's going to start at a 0.5 millimeter size. Let's just test that out. Chamfer actually might start at 10. Yes, you can see there 10, much bigger size. So fillet, there's 4 different types of fillets. I'm not going to touch on Fillet Expert in this example. And again, to be honest, in 20 years of using SolidWorks, I've used Fillet Expert a handful of times. Okay. Nearly always I'm using manual fillets because I want full control over what I'm doing. So let's just start with how to add a simple fillet. You click an edge. Now our preview's got up to 10 millimeters, that's fine. You click an edge and it's going to create the preview here. It's going to cut away material and basically add tangency from one face to the other with a radius at the dimension that you've set, which is 10 millimeters. Okay, as we can see there. Now you can change that size in the property manager, and that's going to change the preview. If you do not see a preview, like in this example, often it's because your fillet is too big. So I've changed my size up to 30 millimeters, but the size of this cylinder is only 50 millimeters in diameter, right? So it's too big. The biggest size fillet I could do in this example is 25, where it becomes a perfect dome across the top. Let's hit that back to 10. Now let's talk through, before we talk about the different types, let's talk through the options. Show selection toolbar. What that means is when I click on an edge, it's going to show me this little pop-up. This is the selection toolbar. This is in newer versions of SolidWorks, and it makes it easier to select multiple elements of your model without going around and clicking on them individually. Can be very, very useful, particularly when you're doing a lot of coring out and a lot of patterns with different things where you might have hundreds of edges to select. You can do it very quickly. Of course, always consider your design intent. Maybe that whole thing could be done better with doing one cut, one fillet, and then patterning that however many times you need to. We'll show an example of that soon. Left edge loop, connected to start face, internal feature, right feature. So if I click on this one here, it's actually going to add all of those selections into my items to fillet box without me needing to do anything. All right, so that can be really handy. Other times it can be very annoying if you have hundreds of edges in your model and you accidentally scroll over one of those items. It might take 10, 15, 20 seconds to preview. Okay, even then it'll preview and tell you it potentially can't do it. It's just wasted a bit of your time. So be careful with using that tool. Can be useful, but you'll need to learn how to use it. Let me just clear those selections and go back to the top one. Tangent propagation. Let's do tangent propagation, and to show that, I'm just going to add one fillet here. I'm going to select fillet and do another one, and I'm going to select this back edge. Now you can see when I select this edge, it's just going from corner to corner because on the ends of that, there's 2 flat faces. Let me deselect that one and select this one here. In this example, it goes all the way around the side. And the reason for that is it's got this tangency that lets the fillet continue around an edge. So again, this is a very powerful tool. If you use your fillets in the right order as you're creating your geometry, it's going to mean that you need to do less selections as you go. Okay, as you're creating more detail through your model. Now, sometimes you do not want to use that tangency. So you can uncheck that box, and that fillet now is only going to go along that edge. It's going to ignore the curve and just fill it like it would any other time. Right, let's keep going. So preview button. So you have 3 options: full preview, partial preview, or no preview. No preview is obvious. It's not going to show you anything. Now, why you would want to use these selections is because sometimes you might be selecting hundreds of fillets in one option. And if you want to preview all of them, well, it might take another 30 seconds or a minute to preview that for you. Sometimes you don't need to know. Partial preview will just show you, I think, one of the fillets. Okay, so I'm adding more edges to this, but it's only showing me the first fillet. And by partial preview, it means it's showing me like the size. So I can see, okay, it's 10 millimeters. I change that to 5. It's only showing me one of them. So if I deselect this one, it's going to show me another one.
Right.
And then full preview is going to show you all the fillets as if they were complete. Now, by default, I have tangent propagation on and I have full preview on. I would only ever turn off tangent propagation if I need to do specific geometry that I don't want it to be tangent. And it's very, very rare that I turn full preview off. That would only be in the most complex of models where I've got hundreds or thousands of edges and I'm trying to do it all in one feature, which I don't always do. And it's taking too long to preview. I'll turn that off. Generally, you leave those settings on. All right, so let's look at the fillet parameters. So this is symmetric. Let's just change some of these edges so it becomes easier to see. So symmetric means, in this case, I've got a 10 millimeter radius. If I press OK, what that means from this view is that from this edge to here is 10, and from this edge to here is also 10. Now, if I change that fillet to 5, you can see 5 and 5 for that distance. Now, I can edit that fillet. Let's just change the size back up to 10. And I can make it asymmetric, which means I can control the distance of each of those sides individually. So I can have 10 millimeters on the side and 5 millimeters on the top, which is what you can see in this example here. Or I can go 20 and 5. If I want to flip them around, I press this arrow here. That's going to change the direction. So the end result, in this case, 20 and 5, I still get a smooth tangent join, but it's not a symmetric radius. Let's go back to symmetric, and I want to show you now the profile, because this is a basic circular fillet. Another example, you can create this fillet by doing an arc and 2 straight lines, and then extrude cutting. But you have options here in the profile to be more detailed with the type of curve that's being used. There's conic row, where you can control this function here, and that's going to adjust the exact shape of that radius. You can use conic radius. You can use curvature continuous. Now, all of these settings here are to do with high level and high detail levels of surfacing, A-class surfacing. And that's something that I actually don't know that much about. Something I might get more involved with if I have a project that ever calls for it, but in my career to date, I've had very limited need to use some of these tools. I have used them before in some of the products that I've worked on, but in most cases, and generally in basic work, you'll get away with just using the simple circular profile for your fillets. And then we have options here, setback parameters and partial edge parameters. Now, partial edge is the one that I'll talk to you about. So partial edge, if we turn it on, you can see that there's 2 dots that have been added to my line. So I've got a purple dot on the right and a green dot on the left. And that relates to the colors that you can see in the property manager. I can set a distance that my fillet is going to offset from that edge by putting a number in here. And I could do the same on the other side, and I'll press OK. And what it means is it creates a fillet, but offset from the edges of the original selection. So this is another way of creating like a cut, extruded cut across this edge, but just mid-plane, for instance, or from one side to another, but leaving some material on the ends. You do have the option to change the start and end conditions. You can be a percentage. So you can say, I want it to stay 25% off that end and 25% off that end. And it'll work it out for you. You know, if it gets bigger or smaller. If we talk, as we have before, about control, so I make this bigger or smaller, well, it's going to stay 25% from the end no matter how big it gets. Let's delete those fillets. Let's look at the other options quickly. So that is a constant size fillet, the one that we've been using. And that is the one that you will use 95% of the time. Now, the other types, still useful. we have a variable size fillet. A variable size fillet lets you have a fillet which can change dimension. So it can start at 2 millimeters and go to 20 millimeters, for instance. And you can change the transition from smooth to straight. Then you can change the profile like we saw earlier. The next fillet type is a face fillet. Now a face fillet, when you're using that, you're not actually selecting an edge, you're selecting faces. So I might select this face and this face. Sorry, I need to make sure I'm checking the right box. So face 1, blue on the left, face 2, pink on the right. It will create a fillet between those two faces. You have the same control after that. It's just that the selection method is slightly different. And the use case or scenario for this is sometimes where you might not have a specific edge to select, but the faces are nearby, or there's another intersecting face in between them that is causing problems. It's hard to pick out exactly a scenario for this to explain in very simple terms, but it is there. And then the last one, a full round fillet. For this, I'm going to show you a selection trick. So for a full round fillet, we want to select 3 options, 3 faces. Face 1 on the left. Now, when you see that little arrow icon on the right mouse button of your cursor, if you hit your right mouse button, it's going to go to the next selection box, which is here, the purple one. So now I can select this face, right mouse button, and then select this face. And then the preview, you can see it's a full round, basically like a semicircle. For this option, there's no dimension that you're inputting because it's all based on the geometry. And so if your geometry changes, the size of that fillet will change with it. Let's talk a little more about how you can select and the way in which you should select your faces and edges for fillets. So here I'm going to suggest, or I'm going to use a basic constant size fillet. I'm going to set my radius to 5, and I'm going to show you my workflow. If I was to select, for instance, these 4 edges, maybe I might make that a larger radius of 15. And that could be one fillet. And then I might do another fillet, and this one might be smaller, and 5. Now let's say I wanted to do this edge and this edge together. Well, I could make 2 selections like I've just done there, or I can select the face. And when I select a face, it's going to go to the edges connected to that face. It means one less click for me, thousands of hours saved over a career. So keep that in mind. I'm going to select that face and this top edge here. And then I'm going to right click for OK. Let's look at something different. Let's try a larger fillet, but this time just on one corner and another corner, and then try another fillet on this edge and this edge, but turn off tangent, and then another fillet, smaller, keep on tangent, but this time select the top face and this face. You can see how we can very quickly get different results with our geometry. Just a few tweaks to dimensions, and also, whether a fillet is tangent led or not. We're going to apply some fillets to some of the parts that we've already created. We're not using any chamfers that I know of, but we will use some fillets. So let's go through those parts and make some adjustments, and then add some fillets to them. We're going to start with this PO6, very simple one. I want you to add a 1 millimeter fillet to this face on the outside. You can see what that's going to do is cut away material from the outside and give a little bit of a curve to that edge on both ends of the object, and then hit save. And then I'm going to show you another handy tool for flipping between your files that are open in SolidWorks, and that is Control Tab. And when you press that and hold the Control key down, you can actually press Tab to cycle through your files. And I want to go here to PO1. So with PO1 highlighted, I let go of Control and it takes me to this file. Now we left it here previously with a cut loft. I want to go back a few steps. On the right plane, we're going to add a cut extrude, which is a circle, which is 11 millimeters in size. So, features cut extrude to remove materials all the way through the middle. And then when you've done that, just like we did on the last part, PO6, we're going to add a 1 millimeter radius to that inside face to get a nice smooth edge on that whole entry. Press save. And then there's one more example. I want you to go to P02, and we don't know exactly the size we're going to need for a fillet on this, but I want you to add one just while we're in the habit. Let's say 2 millimeters to the outside edge. Later, as we fit this into an assembly, we'll work out if we need to make that bigger or smaller. All right, that's the end of this lecture. See you in the next one. All right, let's have a look now at chamfers. So chamfer underneath the fillet. What a chamfer will do is cut off material. We can see in our property manager here, you have a few different chamfer types, just like you did for fillets. Now we have a asymmetric chamfer, which is angle distance. Can be symmetric if your angle is 45 degrees. But an angle distance chamfer is where you're selecting an edge, you're selecting a distance and an angle. Your angle, let's change that to 30 so it's more obvious what direction it is. And you can press flip direction to change the angle. We have a distance chamfer, which is controlled by distance, much like the fillets. All right, so we can make it asymmetric like this, or symmetric. I know there's a couple other options. We have a face-to-face chamfer, which means you select your two faces, and the distance you're providing, the diameter is the dimension you're providing is actually the length of what you can see there, kind of like a radius, or kind of like a fillet. It's the distance going from where it sets back on both the top and the side face. So that is what's called a face chamfer. And then there's also two other options here, an offset face chamfer and a vertex chamfer. Now, a vertex chamfer looks really neat. I think that's a tool that I probably should use more. But to be honest, this is a tool that I've never used in my entire career. It's pretty neat though. I might pick that up sometime soon. And we have here the offset face chamfer, which I've used. I don't know if I've ever used, again, that tool, but it is an option for you to check out and learn about if you're interested. Now, chamfers work almost in an identical way to fillets. The main thing or difference with the chamfer is obviously they don't create tangency on their own. Often a chamfer might be used on an edge that already has some tangency to it, so a chamfer can run all the way around it. An example of that might be having a 10 millimeter radius fillet on, let's say, these edges, and then doing a chamfer to cut away some material on this edge. Okay, so that is the fillet and chamfer tool. Thanks again for watching. Fillets and chamfers might seem simple, but using them well is a sign of a thoughtful designer, and there's way more to them than most people think. If this helped clarify anything for you, please like, share, or comment below. And don't forget to explore the full course on Udemy. It's packed with examples and projects that build real skills. See you in the next one. Hey, thanks for watching the video all the way to the end. If you enjoyed it, please like and share. If you've got any suggestions for other content, leave it in the comments below. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And there's some other videos here. Check out. Thanks.